galaxy's War Council chamber was a place of order, control, and calculation. The Great Hall floated in the center of a massive orbital station, surrounded by the cold silence of space. Inside, the leaders of 23 star systems sat, in a perfect circle of habak chairs, each carved from the stone of their homeworlds. At the very center of this circle stood a single, empty seat. No one knew why it was there. It had no emblem, no flag, and no name. Some thought it was a relic from an earlier design of the chamber. Others whispered it was a reminder of a long-forgotten species. Whatever the truth, it was never touched, never moved, and never spoken about, until today. The meeting had begun in the usual way: grim reports, enemy fleet movements, and lists of worlds already lost. Holograms flickered above the table, showing red lines spreading across star maps like a slow infection. The enemy, known only as the Vor Dominion, had crushed every defense the Council had thrown at them. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, their numbers endless. One planet after another had fallen. They had been in crisis for months, but this time there was a weight in the air that made everyone's skin feel too tight. No one noticed the change at first. The lights dimmed for a second, just a flicker, like the station's power grid had hiccuped. A few glanced up, irritated, but the conversation continued. Then the air itself seemed to shift. Faint metallic temps slid across the chamber as if someone had just fired a weapon far away. The youngest delegate, a scaled creature from Colaris, frowned and looked toward the empty seat. His frills twitched. He whispered something to the delegate beside him, but the words were lost in the rising sound of voices. The sound stopped. Not faded, stopped. It was as if the galaxy had suddenly decided to hold its breath. The guards near the doors stiffened. One put a hand to his weapon, not because he had seen anything, but because his instincts screamed. At him, the delegates began glancing around, their eyes darting from one face to another. The empty seat at the center of the circle no longer seemed like a harmless piece of furniture. It seemed to be waiting. Without warning, there was a figure in it. No sound of footsteps, no shimmer of cloaking tech, no flash of teleportation. Light one moment it was empty, and the next, someone was there. A human. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The galaxy had not seen a living human in 2 centuries. Records said they had been wiped out in the siege of Earth, their worlds turned to ash. For most, the word human belonged to history, a dangerous legend told in hushed tones. And yet here one sat, tall and still, wearing a dark coat that seemed almost too plain for the room. His face was unreadable, his eyes sharp and steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The air around him seemed heavier, charged with something no one could name. The first to break the silence was the council speaker, a silver-skinned being whose voice was known for its calm authority. That voice shook now. "Identify yourself," the speaker demanded, though it sounded more like a plea than an order. The human's gaze moved slowly around the circle, meeting the eyes of every leader in turn. Many of them flinched without meaning to. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall, as if the air itself was helping the words reach them. "Earth remembers you," he said. The words were simple, but they struck like a blade. The speaker's face went pale. A dozen delegates shifted in their seats. One, a reptilian warlord, began muttering under his breath in a language only a few understood, and those who did immediately looked away. The guards took a cautious step forward, but stopped when the human's eyes flicked toward them. Something about that glance made their hands tremble. One of them felt the sudden urge to lower his weapon, as though pointing it at this figure would be the last thing he ever did. The human leaned back in the chair as if he had all the time in the universe. "You sit here," he said slowly, speaking of fleets and numbers, pretending you are united. "But you forget the promises you made. You forget the war you left us to fight alone." His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, like the hum of a hidden blade. "We did not forget." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The speaker tried to recover his composure. "If you are truly human, then you have no place here. Your kind." The human's eyes narrowed. "My kind," he interrupted. "Built the peace you have enjoyed for 2 centuries. My kind bled for it, and my kind was betrayed for it." He rose from the chair in one smooth motion, and for the first time, every leader in the room realized he was armed, not with visible weapons, but with something far more dangerous: intent. The Vor Dominion's advance, the crumbling defenses, the desperate plans, all of it suddenly felt small in the shadow of this moment. The galaxy's leaders stared at the lone human and knew, without being told, that the war had just changed. Every pair of eyes in the chamber followed the human as he stood in the center, the empty seat now behind him like a shadow from the past. No one spoke for several seconds. It wasn't fear of his weapons. He carried none in sight, but something heavier, something in the way he looked at them. It was the same look a predator might give a herd that had long forgotten what it done, meant to be hunted. The council speaker's voice cracked as he tried to regain control of the moment. You claim to speak for Earth. That is impossible. Humanity was erased in the siege. The archives, your archives," the human said sharply, cutting him off, "are written by those who wanted us gone."
Ow.
"Do you think I care what your history says?" His tone was calm, but each word landed with the weight of an accusation. He took a step forward, and the guards at the walls stiffened again. "The truth is not buried. Waits, and so did we." The words unsettled more than half the chamber. The ambassador from the Tavera Alliance, a thin figure with translucent skin, leaned forward. "Why now? If you survived, why wait 200 years to show yourself?" The human's gaze shifted to her, and for a brief moment, the air in the room seemed to grow colder. "Because," he said, "we were waiting for the galaxy to show its true face, to see which worlds would keep their promises, and which would sell us to our enemies." Several leaders exchanged uneasy glances. The phrase hung in the air: "Sell us to our enemies." No one wanted to be the first to respond. The reptilian warlord from Gethros Prime slammed his clawed hand against the table. "This is nonsense. The war against the Vor Dominion has nothing to do with the humans." "Oh, that species is gone, is it?" The human interrupted again, his voice still even but laced with steel. He reached into the inside, a pocket of his coat, and pulled out a small black device no larger than his palm. It was dull and unmarked, but as soon as he placed it on the table, a low, pulsing sound filled the air. A strange pattern of tones, not music, not speech, but a code. Several alien generals froze. One of them, a veteran from the Saren fleet, actually pushed his chair back in shock. "Where did you get that signal?" he demanded. The human didn't answer. Instead, he let the sound play for a few more seconds before pressing a single button. The device went silent, and in the stillness that followed, he said, "You know what it means. You remember it. You remember us." The council speaker shifted. Uncomfortably, his silver skin seemed to dim, as if the light no longer wanted to reflect from it. That code was erased from all records after the siege. Only war commanders knew it. It called for no surrender. The human finished for him. No retreat, no compromise. "It was the last message Earth sent before your council signed the Treaty of Surrender without us." The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. The youngest delegates didn't fully understand, but the older ones did, and they looked as if they wished they didn't. The war against the Vor Dominion had been costly. Yes, but the story told in schools was that humanity had fallen too quickly to be saved. This man's presence and the signal he carried told a different story. The Tavera ambassador's voice trembled slightly. You're saying we abandoned you on purpose." I'm not saying it, the human replied, his eyes scanning. Their faces, I'm reminding you. Somewhere at the far end of the chamber, a quiet alarm began to beep. A private alert meant only for the council speaker, but the human heard it anyway. He turned his head slightly, almost amused, and, "Now you're wondering if this is a threat?" he said. "You're wondering if I came here for revenge?" The speaker swallowed hard. "Did you?" The human leaned forward just enough for his shadow to fall across the table. "That," he said, "depends on what you do next." The silence after those words was unbearable. It was the kind of silence that came before something irreversible. The Vor Dominion's war, the galaxy's fragile alliances, the centuries of peace, all of it now felt like a thin layer of ice under their feet. And the human had just stepped on it. Far beyond the station where the War Council met, the Vor Dominion's forward fleet drifted at the edge of contested space. Massive warships, black and angular, hung in formation like a row of silent blades. Their commanders had been preparing for another push toward the heart of the galaxy, confident that no force could stop them. But then, without warning, every vessel came to a halt. In the Dominion's command carrier, a shadowed figure sat in the war chair, its long fingers drumming against the armrest. "Confirm it again," the commander ordered. "The communications." Officer's voice trembled. "Sir, the report comes from 3 separate intelligence cells. It's the same every time." "Say it," the commander demanded. The officer hesitated, then said, "A human has appeared at the War Council." The room went cold. The commander's fingers stopped moving. No one in the chamber dared speak. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the ship's engines. "That's impossible," the commander finally said, but his tone lacked conviction. "They were eradicated." "You thought so?" the officer replied quietly. "But the scouts swear they saw him." He spoke. He gave the old signal. That was when the second wave of silence hit, heavier, deeper. The signal. The Vor Dominions. Officers all knew the stories. Centuries ago, when they had first clashed with humanity, that signal had been the last thing their fleets heard before disappearing into fire and wreckage. The Dominion had won many wars, crushed countless civilizations. But humans had been different. Humans fought in ways the Vor still didn't understand, ways that left scars deeper than any wound. Back in the council chamber, the human seemed almost aware of the ripple his presence was sending across the galaxy. He stood motionless, his expression unreadable, while the alien leaders whispered to each other in urgent tones. One of them, a massive insectoid from the Sakaar hive, finally slammed a claw down and demanded, "Why do they fear you? The Vor crush every army, yet they stop when they hear of you." The human's eyes turned toward him, calm but piercing. "Because they remember," he said. "They remember the war you pretend to forget. They remember what happened to the fleets that came for Earth, and they know if we are here, then we are ready to finish what we started." The statement hit like a physical blow. Some delegates looked as if they had just realized they were standing too close to a cliff. Council speaker tried to steady the moment. "You're suggesting," he began carefully, "that your return alone can stop them?" The human tilted his head slightly. "I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you they have already stopped, haven't they?" The speaker blinked, and then his aide hurried over, whispering in his ear. The speaker's eyes widened, looked toward the human, then back at the others. "Our border scans show. The Vor fleet has paused. They're not advancing." A low murmur spread around the room. The Tavar ambassador leaned forward. "They fear you. They fear what I represent," the human corrected. "No, Earth never truly dies, and now, so do you." The council was divided. Some leaders began to see him as their only hope. Others saw him as a greater danger than the Vor themselves. In the far corner, 2 delegates whispered furiously. In a private tongue, glancing toward the guards, the human noticed. His mouth curved into the faintest smile, one without warmth. "You have a decision to make," he said. "Stand with me, or be remembered as the ones who betrayed us twice." In that moment, it was clear to everyone in the chamber, whatever war they had been fighting before, it had just changed. And for the first time in 2 centuries, The galaxy was about to remember what it meant to fight a human. The council chamber felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved in during the last few minutes. The human's words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Around the circle, some leaders sat rigid, their expressions carved from stone, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding his eyes. The silence stretched until it was almost painful, broken only by the faint hum of the station's systems. Finally, the insectoid warlord from the Sakar hive leaned forward, his antennae curling in irritation. "You speak as if you have the right to command us," he said, his voice clicking like metal on stone. "Yet you stand here alone, a ghost from a dead world." The human's gaze moved to him slowly, as if measuring something. "Alone?" he said quietly. "Is that what you see?" Before anyone could answer, the human reached up and tapped the side of his coat. A barely audible tone pulsed in the air, so faint it could almost be mistaken for a trick of the ears. A moment later, a voice crackled into existence, not from the council's systems, but from somewhere else entirely, somewhere far beyond the station. "Confirmed," the voice said. Standing by, delegates shifted uneasily. The speaker's silver skin dimmed again. "What was that?" he asked. "Proof," the human replied, "that I am not here alone. I came first because I wanted to look you in the eyes before you made your choice." He let the words settle. Before continuing, "Stand with me, and we end this war. Betray me again, and you won't get the chance to regret it." The Tavera ambassador hesitated, her translucent skin catching the light in nervous ripples. "And if some of us choose not to stand with you?" The human's expression didn't change. "Then," he said, "you'll stand in the way, and history will remember you for that." That was when the whispering began, not quiet discussions, but sharp, hurried exchanges between certain delegates. A few spoke into private comms, their voices too low to catch. One delegate, a narrow-eyed merchant prince from the Vrin conglomerate, pressed a hidden switch beneath the table. In a shadowed alcove, 2 council guards received an urgent order: "Remove the human." Quietly, the human turned his head slightly, as though he'd heard the order, despite its secrecy. His lips curved into that same faint, cold smile. He didn't move as the guards began to circle the chamber, pretending to adjust their positions. Then he spoke again, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Before you decide whether to stand with me or against me, there's something you should see." He raised his wrist, and a small holographic projection flared to life above his forearm. The image of a ship, unlike any the galaxy had seen in centuries. It was sleek, angular, armored in a way that defied known designs. But the most unsettling part wasn't its size or shape. It was the flag painted along its hull, deep blue with a scattering of white stars and stripes of red and white. Gasps filled the chamber. Several older delegates went pale. "That ship," the speaker whispered, "was destroyed at the siege. I saw the reports myself." The human shut off the hologram. "You saw what we wanted you to see," he said, "and that ship is not alone." As if on cue, a shadow fell across the chamber's high glass dome. The delegates looked up. At first, they saw only darkness. Then they realized it wasn't the station's lights failing. It was a shape. A massive, silent shape blotting out the stars. The human glanced up with them, his voice low but carrying an edge that cut through the air. "Now," he said, "make your choice." No one moved. No one spoke. The darkness above the glass dome pressed down like the weight of an ocean. Slowly, the station's exterior lighting adjusted, revealing the shape that had blotted out the stars, a warship so large it seemed to bend the space around it. Its black hull reflected almost nothing, but where the light caught it. Alien and human design merged into something both beautiful and terrifying. Along its side, faint blue lines pulsed like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The delegates stared upward in silence. The insectoid warlord from the Sakar hive tilted his head sharply. "That is not possible," he hissed. The human didn't look up. He simply stood there, watching their faces. "Possible," he said, "is just another word for something you haven't seen yet." Then more shadows began to appear. First 1, then 3, then 10. They emerged from nothingness, as if space itself was peeling back to reveal them. Each ship was cloaked until that moment, their outlines hidden from every scan. Now they hung above the station in a formation so precise it seemed choreographed thousands of vessels. Silent and waiting, a voice cut through the councils. "Come, system," this time loud enough for all to hear. "This is Fleet Command, awaiting orders." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the chamber. Several delegates leaned toward each other, whispering frantically in languages they hoped the human didn't understand. The speaker's silver skin had lost nearly all its luster. How long have they been here?" he asked, the words almost a whisper. The human finally looked up, his gaze meeting the endless dark shapes above. "Long enough," he said. The Tavar ambassador's voice was unsteady. "Why didn't you strike before now?" "Because," the human replied, "we weren't here to save you before. We were here to watch, to listen, to see if the galaxy had learned anything from the last time it faced us." He let his gaze sweep the room, pausing on each leader who had once argued against human involvement. It hasn't. Then, without warning, the comms flared again. "Enemy fleet detected. For Dominion advancing on sector line." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates demanded defensive positions. Others shouted to open negotiations, but the human didn't move. His voice was calm, almost cold, when he finally spoke into his wrist. "Fleet Command," he said, "uncloak all units." Outside, the darkness thickened. Hundreds more ships shimmered into sight, filling the black with sharp lines and silent power. Their hulls bore the same flag, the same stars and stripes, and each one carried weapons that glinted faintly in the light of distant suns. The Vor Dominion fleet had paused before, uncertain. Now, their hesitation turned into panic. Reports came flooding in from border scouts. Enemy ships breaking formation. Commanders barking conflicting orders. Long-range scanners picking up abrupt retreats. The speaker turned toward the human, his voice shaking. "They're falling back." The human finally met his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "They're running. And we're not letting them get away this time." Before the speaker could respond, the human tapped his wrist again. Pursuit authorization granted. Target all retreating vessels. No survivors. Some delegates flinched at the order. Others watched with grim fascination. Above them, the silent fleet began to move, shifting like a vast predator stretching before the hunt. And in that moment, every leader in the chamber understood humanity had not come back to join the war. Humanity had come back to end it. Hours later, the war was over. Not weeks, not months, hours. The Vor Dominion's great fleets, the same armadas that had burned hundreds of worlds and humbled entire civilizations, were gone. Some were vaporized in blinding flashes of light. Others were torn apart in silence, their remains drifting in the dark like scraps of paper on an endless sea. The human fleet had moved with precision, striking not in wild fury, but with deliberate surgical force. Every shot had purpose. Every ship that tried to flee had been tracked, cornered, and erased. The galaxy's leaders had watched it all from the War Council's chamber. The battle projected in perfect clarity above their heads. At first, they had stared in awe, then in disbelief, and finally in fear. When it was done, the projections vanished, leaving only the soft reflection of the human's dark coat as he stepped back into the center of the circle. He carried something small in his hand, a metal cube no larger than a clenched fist. He set it down on the council's table with a quiet click. The sound was somehow louder than the destruction they had just witnessed. "This," he said, his voice calm and steady, "is a signal beacon. It contains the coordinates to Earth. If a threat like this comes again, you call us first." Locking went each set of eyes in turn. "No, you will not sign another treaty without us. You will not fight another war without us. And you will not forget us again." No one dared to speak. Even those who had plotted against him earlier sat frozen, their plans crumbling like dust in their hands. The speaker's voice, when it finally came, was barely more than a whisper. "And if we do forget, The human's expression didn't. Change you won't, he said simply. Because if you do, well, remember, he turned to leave, and as he reached the great doors of the chamber, a faint vibration shivered through the floor. Outside, the vast human fleet was already moving, reforming into precise patterns as if answering some silent command. One by one, their massive ships began to turn toward the dark, slipping away into the depths of space. Only one vessel remained visible, the same warship that had first appeared above the station. It hung there for a moment, engines idling, as if waiting for something. Then its coms flared to life. Safe travels, Council, and don't lose our number. The voice was light, almost amused, but carried the weight of a promise that could shatter worlds. Moments later, the ship vanished into the black, and the stars returned to the sky above the dome. Far away, beyond the reach of the Council's scanners, a blue planet turned slowly in the light of its sun. Oceans shimmered, clouds drifted lazily across green continents, and somewhere on its surface, deep within a fortified city, a voice reported calmly into a secure channel. Contact made. Message delivered. The galaxy remembers again. But in the silence that followed, another voice replied, older, colder. Good. Then prepare. They've only seen a fraction of what we can do.